Long before there was organized religion, human beings had an intuitive sense that there was a greater power, that there was God. Long before official church theology, human beings had a personal, direct, and unmediated experience of the divine. This experience is beyond the power of words to describe. But people across all cultures speak of a sense of oneness with the universe, some type of cosmic consciousness, a type of deep knowing. This is the way of the mystic. In this new sermon series at First-Plymouth, we will explore the mystical heart of religion, the truth that the reality of God can be experienced, not simply believed.
This is the last sermon in the series on mysticism. Now, preaching on mysticism during a pandemic might seem like an odd choice, almost diversionary or escapist, but I do so with specific intention. Mysticism, the personal experience of God. You see, at this time, we can't gather at church. We can't have our communal, corporate experience of God. So I need you to claim that personal connection right now. I need you to lay claim to the core mystical notion that you are of God. You have been created by God, and what is created by God comes from the essence of God. You are the essence of God's love. I need you to hold on to that now in this time of isolation. Hearing Patrick read from Acts chapter 2 about those early Christians gathering together, sharing a meal with glad and generous hearts, it might seem a little melancholy right now. So I need us to rely on our own connection with God. Mysticism during a pandemic is important because it's mysticism that lays claim to your own depths, the depth of interiority or inwardness. And it says, you have the resources within you. This is a time of high anxiety. This is a hard time, but you have the courage and the perseverance and the patience. Trust that depth of inwardness. And it's mysticism that when you experience God, you will sense a type of gentleness and peace. We need to lay claim to that right now. Personally, during these times of anxiety, I've not been entirely myself. There's been moments I haven't treated people as well, or I don't recognize the way I'm acting. I need that deep centeredness, mysticism. Now, this is the last part of this series, and I'm going to make some basic observations about mysticism, and I want to begin with a story from Anne Lamott. She has this way of writing stories in her books, sharing real pedestrian, kind of prosaic moments in life, but then they point towards God. In her book, Operating Instructions, she tells a story about a single mother who takes her 2-year-old son to Lake Tahoe for the summer. They rent a condo. And you know, Lake Tahoe, it's known for gambling. So the hotels and the condos there, they have these shades and curtains that block out all the light. So you can gamble all night long, come home in the morning, and just make your room pitch black, right? Well, one afternoon, she puts her toddler in the bedroom, closes the curtains, puts him down for a nap in his playpen, closes the door, and then goes to do some work in the living room. After a while, she hears that he is getting up, and then he's knocking on the door. She goes over to open the door and realizes it's locked. Somehow the toddler had pushed the button, and now he's standing in the pitch dark. She can't open the door, and the toddler becomes afraid. And he starts to cry. And she goes into a bit of a panic. She tries to run to the phone and call the rental management company or the condo manager. And then she takes the front door key and she's trying to make that work on the door. Nothing's working. The toddler is beside himself, alone in the pitch dark. Finally, the mother does the only thing she could do. She gets down on the floor and she puts her fingers under that 1 inch of space under the door and says to her toddler, "Grab mommy's fingers. Hold on to mommy's fingers." The toddler gets down on the ground and he's clasping her fingers. They just sit there together for almost a half hour. She knows she should probably go call the fire department or something, but it feels more important just to calm him like that. Then every once in a while, she says to him, "Try the doorknob again." He doesn't have a lot of English yet, but he understands. Every once in a while, he tries the doorknob, and then finally, it jiggles loose. I tell that story because mysticism is a bit like that. We're mostly in the dark, and compared to the mysteries of the universe, we're mostly toddlers. And mysticism is just a touching of those fingers. I know when I say mysticism, you think of the big, fantabulous, amazing revelations in Scripture, right? The big pyrotechnics and visuals. But really, when I say mysticism, I mean the little touches in life, the little glimpses or intimations. It's mostly just holding on to those fingers. We're mostly in the dark. So I want to make the word mysticism itself more prosaic. I want you to claim those little moments in life where you feel a greater connection, where you feel more at peace. That's mystical. If you're standing in your front yard and you see a bumblebee flitting from flower to flower, and you have a sense of beauty and connection, that's mysticism. If you read a poem and it moves you to a type of feeling, that's mysticism. If you have an insight or an idea that creates greater peace and love, that's mystical. Mysticism is mostly just holding on to those little glimpses. We're mostly in the dark. Now, there will come a time where the door opens completely. We'll go through the door into the light. We all die. Death is the primary mystical experience. I know we talk about death as a mystery. It's the primary mystical experience. You will achieve things far greater than any mystic ever, because each one of us will pass through that door. I was with my dad when he received a diagnosis of metastatic cancer, and he knew he wouldn't have long to live. We were sitting in the car together, and he was just beginning to reflect and process that. And he was saying to me that he wasn't afraid to die. He just didn't want to. That he loved life so much and he didn't want to leave those he loved. And as he was speaking, we would fall into moments of silence. And then a grin came across his face, and he said, "You know what, Jim? I'm just damn curious to discover what's after." He just had a curiosity, and he said, "Jim, if there's any way I could communicate from the other side, I'll try." Well, I can't say I've ever received any communications from the other side from my father. But I can't say I haven't either. He appears some in my dreams or even just in my thoughts. We will all experience the greatest mystical moment ever. We will pass through that door. But on this side, we're mostly in the dark. Now, it feels important to me as I'm speaking of mysticism that I say a few words about how do you distinguish between authentic mysticism and fake mysticism or cheaper forms. This matters because there have been people throughout all of history that claim they are experiencing God, and then they create these weird cults or movements that don't look wholesome. So how do you distinguish the difference? Well, let me give a pretty simple, pragmatic answer. Judge mysticism by its fruits. You see, an authentic mystical experience always produces more humility, more love, more peace. If anyone is claiming a mystical experience then creates things that are anxious or fearful or manipulative, that's not authentic. Judge mysticism by its motor effects. What kind of actions does it create? Does it create more justice, more love? That's a pretty simple answer. But so too, it seems that authentic mysticism is something that happens to people. They don't have complete control over it. They can't just dial it up. Now, this makes me a little wary of mystics or psychics that seem to be able to dial up that ability, like palm reading or tarot cards or psychics that you'll pay for insight. Now, listen to me. I think there are more mysteries to the universe than we understand, different levels. And I believe, my mind is very open to some people might have access to insight into those other levels of reality. I believe in psychic possibilities. But when it seems like it can be just dialed up at any moment, authentic mysticism, you're not in control of it. It just happens to you. Now, you can prime the pump to receive a mystical experience. You can. In fact, all through history, there's one method to open yourself up that rises to the top. One primary method to open yourself up to a spiritual experience. It's silence. Now, I know silence doesn't sound as exotic as other methods of creating spiritual experiences like Timothy Leary when he said psychotropic drugs or LSD or even Sufi mystics that whirling dervishes and frantic dancing or driving music or all those other methods, sure, but the primary one through history is silence. It's silence that puts you in that receptive mode for a mystical experience. It was in the 4th century that the Christian church discovered silence. You see, the 4th century was noisy mostly. The church was just beginning to develop. The Roman Empire had just claimed Christianity as the official religion of the realm. And so now there were councils of bishops and there were theological arguments. They were trying to define God and put God into creed and doctrine. It was a noisy century of theological argumentation. And then, right then, Christians began to move into the desert. In Syria and in Egypt, Christians moved into the desert and formed these monasteries. They were called the hesychasts, and they created this form of silent meditation that they felt open themselves to God. In fact, they tried to let go of every possible concept of God. They tried to take out of their minds any notions of God and just create a stillness. Hesychast means quietness or stillness. And their form of meditation was pretty similar to Buddhist meditation, actually. Let go of all thoughts, all rational categories. It was a sort of radical opening yourself to God. They felt that anything you could say about God was not really God. That's just your finite mind putting it in an objective category. Rather, we should still those thoughts and be open. Hesychasts. I encourage you to look for times of silence in your life. It doesn't have to be as exotic as some specific form of meditation. We live in a noisy world. It will drown out the mystical. So look for moments of silence. You're watching a live stream right now. If your heart tells you just to turn it off and just to reside in a moment of silence, that would be very holy. I know during this time of the pandemic, churches are rushing out tons of digital content, and I think that's a little ironic because we don't want you to spend more and more time on screens. And so go ahead and turn me off right now. Have you done it? Wait, you wouldn't know if You know what I mean? We need to claim moments of silence. And silence just doesn't mean prayer or meditation. A walk is silence, or even starting to listen to your dreams as a form of silence. Open yourself to that divine mystery. So here we are, near the end of this series. And I need to go back to the most basic point about mysticism. You see, mysticism is saying that God is a mystery. That God is not a problem to be solved or a notion to be encapsulated in a concept. God is to be experienced. God is not a problem to be solved, but a love to be experienced. I need to talk about one of the most famous French philosophers of the 20th century. He believed that life was not a problem to be solved, but that life is a mystery to be experienced. If you don't know of him, let me introduce you to Gabrielle Marcel. He was the archetypal French intellectual. He was born in Paris in 1889. He died in Paris in 1973. Now, as a young boy, it was clear his mind was prodigious. But he didn't much like school. The highly competitive framework of the schooling in Paris at that time, he rejected it. It was clear he was an intellect of a different order, but the competition and the conforming quality of education, so he found solace in the arts and music and drama. He went on to be a musician and wrote plays. But he also went on to be an intellectual. He got his PhD, Gabrielle Marcel. He believed that we live in a broken world. Now, by broken, he meant that we've lost a sense of transcendence. We've lost a sense of the tragic. We think we're in control of all things. And we've lost the ability to really honor persons. He believed that society had become purely functional and relied on technique, that it saw life as a problem to be solved with experts in technique and technologies. But Marcel thought life was a mystery to be experienced. Life wasn't a problem. Now, Marcel grew up in an agnostic home, not religious at all, but in his 30s he converted to Roman Catholicism, for he felt that Christianity held that mystery. And so in the core of his philosophy is the distinction between a problem and a mystery. A problem is something that you lay siege to. It's outside yourself, and you try to deploy strategies, methods, techniques, functions to solve that problem, be done with it, and move on. But a mystery, oh, that's different. A mystery engages you. You're part of it, and you don't solve it in some functional way. You experience it and you learn from it. Life is not a problem, my friends. Life is a love to be experienced. And so now at the end of this series, I'm back in 1 John chapter 4. No one has ever seen God. But when you love each other, God abides in us, and God's love is perfected in us, for God is love. My friends, might you experience that love. Might you be that love.